My name is Meklit, and what you're seeing here today is part of a project, an excerpt of movement. I like to say that I make the music I wish I had when I was growing up. Music that could be from many places, like me. My story might be unique, but I am not alone. Migration is unfolding faster and further than it ever has before, and it is just going to keep going, y'all. Come back, come home, but not now. Come back, come loving in day, buddy. Boy, da, ya lodge. Boy, da, you won't say lodge. Boy, da, ya lodge. Boy, da, you won't say, I won't say, I won't say lodge.
So you're a storyteller and a singer and a musician and much more. And as a storyteller, why do you use music as your medium for expression? Are there things you can say through the music that you can't say in a spoken or written word?
Well, for me, it's very complementary. I find that the deepest power in what I'm able to express is when they're both there together. For example, it can be hard to say what you want to. It can be hard to talk about music because we use music to talk about the things that are hard to talk about, so it all gets very circular very quickly. But when we tell personal stories and music is a part of that, it can ring the strings in us that are below the gates where we say, this is me or that's not me, because, oh, it's moving my shoulders, it's moving my hips. It can get me to a place where it can open folks up. And so I find that working together, music and storytelling, is really the most powerful tool that I have.
Wonderful. So you tell stories of immigration, and when we just sit and listen to your songs and your stories, it's so beautiful and so life-affirming, and we live in a time when it seems like hearts have hardened to the immigrant, and I'm just wondering, how do you respond to the environment where there's this sort of antagonism? Have you seen a change in a more antagonistic way, and how do you respond to that?
Well, what I've actually found, and maybe y'all might resonate with this, is that the extremes are true. So people are both more open and more closed. And so what I find is there's a resonance and an openness now that I've never found before, where like in my childhood, everything I had to explain, or people would hear my name and they would be like, oh, not us. And now it's not like that anymore amongst the communities that I'm blessed to be a part of and to help build. But I also find that there is that challenge, which is that immigration and migration is used as a political tool. That when you just do a plain old Google search of the word migrant or the word refugee, what you get is images of masses of people crossing borders, or you get protests. And what we don't have enough of, because we do have it, but we don't have enough of it, is human stories of connection. And that when we ring those notes, what we find is that like everyone can relate to a story about a brother. Everyone can relate to a story about a grandmother. And so what I find is that, you know, it's not that people are more closed, it's that we need more narratives. We need more narratives, new narratives, more complexity, more nuance, and space where people can just be human beings on a journey on this earth, navigating the challenges that are of this time. And migration is only going to ramp up in its challenges in terms of the way it's being used as a wedge issue. So we need regular, everyday folks to be part of changing those narratives.
And when people are driving up those, using those wedge issues and stirring up anxiety and hatred, do you ever find that you have to sort of protect yourself in a way? Are you feeling less secure in your role as a public?
Did I ever feel secure?
Okay. Any concern about Because I think some people, we've heard some stories of, you know, political figures and public figures who feel threatened now.
Well, that happens every day, right? A very dear friend of, I don't know if any of you know Ijoma Oluo, who wrote the book So You Want to Talk About Race, but she's actually a member of my family. She's married to my cousin, who I talked about in the show, the MC. She herself has dealt with, you know, that sort of thing happening online, doxing and online harassment in a very amplified kind of way. So I have not dealt with that, but you can't walk into a public sphere as a public person, speaking your truth as a Black woman, as an immigrant person who came to this country as a refugee, and not expect that at some point there is going to be the kind of white supremacist hatred, you know, that becomes a personal story. So has that happened to me yet? No. Do I think it's going to happen? It's probably inevitable. And what I'm talking about is like in a digital sphere, right? Like we encounter white supremacy every day, right? In the ways that we navigate through the world and through systems and institutions. So I think the answer is that nothing is going to stop me from telling my story, and even when it's hard.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. So we're going to have some funder discussions tomorrow, and I think some of our conversations are going to be about the duty of care that we as funders have for our grantees and that they have for the journalists who are working for them and the subjects of their stories too. It's a through line, particularly in these difficult times, for sure. So there's a wonderful article in the most recent edition of the Stanford Social Innovation Review by Libra Foundation Executive Director Crystal Haling, which offered a wonderful litany of dichotomies where she was urging philanthropy to move from lies to truth, from extraction to regeneration, and from hate to love. And I just wonder, does that thinking resonate with you, particularly the last dichotomy?
I think that we need to have experiences of the world that we want to build in ways that are tangible, visceral. We need to feel what it feels like to be inside of new possibilities. That's what I think music and art can do for us. I also believe strongly in regenerative futures. And for me, what that means is the idea of, or at least partially what it means, because, you know, we could talk for an hour about that, but is the idea of shared futures, that immigration is not my issue because I'm an immigrant, that it's about the future that we all want to build together, and that these things are prismatic, right? We have our ways that we're working on them because maybe that's how we're moved, maybe that's how our ancestry or our particular sense of purpose brings us to make a particular kind of change, but it's about the shared future that we want to all see together. And that doesn't leave anybody out, right? When it comes to shared futures, it's a place where we can all build together, and that actually we need to all be building together, whether or not it's our particular issue area or not.
Wonderful. And so you're, in addition to being a musician, you're a podcaster. And what will people hear that they may not expect to hear in your podcast? Maybe every podcast is unexpected.
Well, I just think that, you know, Movement as a podcast is really about those human, intimate stories that I was speaking about. So, for example, our next episode is about a duo called Larry and Joe. Larry is a legendary harpist from Venezuela who is smack dab in the middle of his asylum case, who worked construction for 8 years and then found a musician who was a bluegrass musician who was in love with Venezuelan llanera music, and together they made a duo that's really about speaking to each other across divides and borders. And, you know, I didn't know this, but the harp and the banjo are like perfect for each other. It's like Appalachian music and Venezuelan folk that are like, you know, genius together. So I think it's about the places that connection and relationship can happen in meaningful, in deep ways that changed both of their lives, but also allowed Larry, after working for 8 years in construction, to return to his life as a musician.
Oh, what a wonderful story. Can't wait to listen to that. So at the end of your podcast, you say, our broadcast partner is the world. We're supported by the National Geographic Society and distributed by PRX. What does all that mean to you? And you know, how do having powerful media partners extend your work?
Well, first of all, the world is like such an incredible broadcast partner, and I've known Marco Werman for a long time. In fact, the reason that I went to South by Southwest when I did that about 10 years ago, was Marco Werman, because he brought me for his showcase called All Music is World Music. But so for me, it's just relationships. It's nexuses of relationships. Certain kinds of nexuses, institutions can lend power and momentum, and I'm grateful that those institutions, National Geographic, PRX, and the world, are all behind our story, saying this needs to have amplification and this needs to have greater resonance out there. But I don't get my power from them. Okay, you know what I mean? Like, it's like it is true partnership, and it is understanding that that we recognize each other's power, and it's a kind of win-win situation where we both get to be a part of deepening the power of storytelling and the power of narrative building as a whole. That is a shared futures understanding of working with powerful institutions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for your music and for your perspective on all this important work.
Thank you so much, Vince.
Great to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.